I just think of it as narrating someone's story. So the overall narrator. So, I'm not the people when I'm telling a story for these people. So I'd say, David was sitting in his chair instead of I sat down in my chair, so just really thinking of it in the third person, like I'm a narrator of this story and I'm going to tell the story of other people. And it includes dialogue that they have, which is naturally in the first person because they're the one talking. But really just thinking of, that idea of having someone narrate your life, that kind of goes on in my head sometimes. Like I'm narrating these people's lives. I'm narrating their story. So thinking of it that way, I'd like Morgan Freeman to be that voice that narrates in my head, but it's not. You can just hear him being like, and then she.
So everyone, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have everyone here. My author today is on the show, and it's great to meet with these great authors, to learn from them, learn from their journey, and hear about what they're writing and what they're showing up in the world with. And Andrea's here today to talk about her journey as an author. Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, David. I'm glad to be here today.
It's great to connect with you and to learn more about your journey. I know that there's some stuff that's been happening in your community recently, but can you tell everybody where you are in this big world of ours?
Yeah, I'm in Wisconsin. We are in the very southern part of Wisconsin in a town called Janesville. And as David alluded to, there was a tornado here yesterday. So everyone is safe in our town. There's some destruction, but we're resilient, and I'm sure neighbors are going to help neighbors and everything will be great.
Yeah, and I'll have links in the show notes for people who can to help support the community and to do whatever they can to be there for your neighbors and stuff. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. But I'm glad you're safe, Andrea. I'm glad you're here. And been thinking about you guys as I read through the news, and the pictures are sad to see, but I'm glad to hear people are safe. So it's great. Thank you for making time to do this. I'm so glad. Excellent. So your journey as an author, Andrea, how did all this start for you? Was there a point in your life where being an author wasn't really a consideration and now you're here? Like what was that thing for you that said, I want to follow this path?
Okay. I would say for the majority of my life, I never thought I would be an author. I am a teacher by trade. I've taught 19 years and started in special education. And then I went back and got a master's in literacy and have done a lot of literacy work with students, helping them to learn to read and to write. And I was always encouraging my kids to write their stories and write what we all have a story to tell and you need to write it. And I would dabble in writing here or there, but never thought I would publish it. Until about 6.5 years ago, my brother-in-law, Michael, and I, we were together as family often are at Christmas time. And Michael is probably a natural born storyteller and the art of oral storytelling. As a job, he works as an insurance auditor. So he meets many people in lots of different walks of life. And he was sitting around telling us some pretty outrageous stories about people he had met. And he was talking about this one guy he met and how he just gave him this creepy vibe. And he's like, I wouldn't be surprised if one day I read that he's a serial killer. And we started laughing about that. And I said, that would make a great book. So the two of us sat there writing in an old notebook. Somebody had an outline for a book about this serial killer and a man who just meets him by happenstance. And Michael said, I'm going to write this book. And I said, great. Well, fast forward 5 years, Michael had never written the book. And as work sometimes is, I was not feeling very creatively motivated at work. I, just kind of going through the motions. Since COVID, teaching has, taken on a whole new feeling and things are a little tougher than they've ever been. So I wanted an outlet and I called up Michael and I said, I'm going to write that book we did the outline for. And he goes, oh, okay, you do that. Kind of that, yeah, you can write a book, lady. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. I really am. So I sat and I pounded out book one. And it's very far from that outline. it does have the idea of someone meeting a serial killer and just that happenstance, but the rest of it just kind of flowed. Because for me, writing is a very creative endeavor, and I kind of let my characters speak for themselves as I write a story. So
nice. Nice. Is there someone that inspires you as an author that you kind of read their works and you're like, oh, I like an element of this author's writing and that author's writing? Are you like an avid reader yourself?
I am a very avid reader. Actually, my youngest son, who lives in New York City, he and I follow each other on Goodreads and kind of always have been competitive of who's going to read more. But since I've started writing, I've really fallen off of the reading because it's very hard to do both for me, because I find other people's ideas are leaking into my writing if I'm reading at the same time. So he is very proud of the fact that he beat me last year and is very much on track to beat me this year for how much he read. But I told him once he's published a book, we'll talk about it. I love, I've always been a person who likes mystery and suspense. And so, John Grisham and Lee Child and those kind of people, some Stephen King, although some of it is a little scary for me, quite honestly. So, but just that idea of figuring out, where things went, and as well as the psychological part of why are people doing what they're doing. So, though I like those parts of reading, and I try to have that in my writing as well.
Yeah, because I find that when I talk to authors that they do have a little bit of this author's style or a little piece of this and that, and they kind of mix them all together and they add their own voice to it, and that kind of becomes their recipe of how they write. Is this all these little influences, and they sometimes pop up when they write, but for the most part, it just kind of helps shape their journey, and that's what I love. Is you're a mixture of all of your life stories and everything that's been in your life, all of your education, your teaching, all of that kind of finds its way into writing your book, right?
Right. So I wrote
you're much more, right? Yeah,
much more. I wrote that first book, The Farm, and I knew when I started writing it that I'd probably continue on once I started getting into the characters, because for me as a reader, I don't like to get bogged down in a complete description of a person. I like that person to grow throughout the reading. So as I was growing those characters, I thought, oh, there's enough here to make it longer, to make it a series. So I got to the point that I felt like my book was too long for a first book. Like my other brother-in-law, the older one, teases me that he loves long books. And I say nobody wants a doorstopper in today's, environment. We all are quick paced and we want to read a book and move on. And so I ended up finding a place in that first book, The Farm, to be comfortable stopping it, to leave that kind of intrigue, that cliffhanger, to move on to the next book. So I made it a series. The series is called Secrets in the Heartland. So, there are 4 books at this point, and the first 3 are completely tied together. So they are the one story of this missing woman, Kelsey Lerner, as well as a couple who are serial killers in the area. And the unique part about this serial killing couple is that the woman is really the diabolical mastermind, and she's leading the man to these crimes. So often we hear about women who, are kind of led into things by the man in their life, and this is the opposite. So that, it's kind of taken on a life of its own. That 6.5 years ago, writing that outline, I never would have seen it going to, but I really enjoy writing the books. Would I like to make money? Absolutely, of course. But more importantly for me is that I want people to read what I've written and to enjoy my writing. It is a really great creative endeavor for me to have that outlet. So that's really what's important to me.
What's the time frame for the books? Like when are they kind of written in? What kind of generation or whatever?
Yeah, they're written current. So
okay.
The book that just came out would be in 2024. So at the beginning of the year. And then they kind of work back about 4 years. So they start in about 2020 and move forward. So they're definitely a current series. I think that'd be an interesting challenge to try to go back and, write
Yeah.
something in the 80s or the 90s and, how different life was, without our cell phones and all our technology.
Yeah, because you mentioned, like, I remember on your website, and you're talking about book 2, Dismantling the Farm, that the FBI agent has a love for his grandfather's love for the 1930s movie about the FBI and stuff. So I'm wondering if you could go like way back.
Oh, way back.
Like to when the farm was like new or recently established. And was there a seed there that kind of saw it resonate in 2024, right?
Yep. Interesting idea. Yeah, definitely.
Interesting.
I love that.
I love history.
Yeah. That's how things for me often go. I have a conversation with someone and this little kernel of an idea gets in my brain and then the story begins to form. I usually write a very loose outline and then I write the beginning of my story. And then, David, I usually write the end of my story, like before
I want to talk about that.
Yeah. And I let my characters fill in the middle. So I kind of write a loose outline, then I begin the beginning. And then when I feel like I've introduced my beginning, I usually write the end. So for me, it's kind of like GPS, like, where you started and where you're ending. And I like that. But the middle is the mystery, even for me as a writer. So
have you written the ending for all of your books then, like that?
I did the first one for sure. The second I just had, because I wasn't sure where it was going. So the ending of the first book is really the ending of the third book because I split them up. So I took that ending and kept it. And then the second one, it was more finding that spot and I really wasn't sure about it. But the fourth book, I wrote the ending right away and I'm working on my fifth book right now. And I just finished writing the ending this week. So I'm not a traditional person. I know there are people who feel like this is the structure you write in and, you need to do this, this, and this. And I really am that belief that, you can't edit a blank page. But I often say you can't make a sandcastle without sand. So, for me, the sand is all these ideas and I have to have that picture of how that sandcastle is going to turn out. That's the ending. And I'm willing to change it somewhat, but I kind of know where I'm headed. And that helps me in my own personality as a writer to like keep going and connect things.
When you're writing, does your characters ever kind of direct you, speak to you, give you ideas? I had an author on recently, and she said that she got to a point where she kind of stalled in her story writing. It was like her characters reached out to her and said, "I want to go this direction," and she's like, "Oh, okay, I'll follow you." And it was like the character was talking to her in the moment. Does your characters ever speak to you?
Yeah, I do feel like that happens. I had a really strong idea for book 4 of how I wanted something to happen, and it just was not flowing for me. Like I would write it, I would delete it, I would write it, and I was like, this is not working. And then I really feel like that the character for me who kind of pushed me was that FBI character, that FBI agent, and he was like, why don't you try this? And it worked really wonderfully. In fact, I've been told by a couple people who've read it that was their favorite scene in the book. So I sometimes feel like, okay, do I have multiple personality disorder? Because these other people get in my head and say, did you think about this? And I do think that's, I do let my characters kind of develop themselves. This fifth book is really looking, I'm really concentrating on the daughter of the woman who went missing in the first 3 and her life now. And I actually spent some time and I went back and reread my own books, just highlighting those parts about her so I could fill her in as a more dimensional person.
For your character development, do you have your characters loosely related to people in your life that you're kind of pulling inspiration from? Are you kind of in the story yourself as the author, or are you completely building your characters brand new with no connection to anyone in your world?
I would say that some of my characters have loose connections to people in my life. But none of them are an exact replica of someone. sometimes my characters are kind of conglomerations of people that I feel like are, I take a little bit from this person and a little bit from that person, and I kind of make them into this new person. And, whether it's a person who, has rubbed me the wrong way in some point, and that helps me to build that character of the evil person, the one who is doing the wrongdoing. Just like all these little things throughout time, those people who like to park in wonky ways, and my character might take that on, and everybody doesn't like that, and just those kind of things, but for the most part, I try to make these new people that are just themselves and develop them over time.
Where do you write? Like, where do you have a spot in your house? Do you have a place you go to? Do you leave your house and go somewhere? Like, where do you find inspiration and time to write?
I generally write at home. My husband and I are empty nesters now, so it's a pretty quiet place. So I have a real comfy chair in our basement, which is got an open window. It's where we live on a hill. So I just sit there and I'm able to just write. What I do find is that if I get really stuck, it's helpful to me to be somewhere else too, to pack up my laptop and go and try to write somewhere else, so that I'm like, okay, what do I want to write about? Okay, I'm going to go sit in a coffee shop where there's some stuff going on, and I'm going to observe people. And a lot of times that's helped me to kind of get out of that stuckness. Like, oh, okay, they could be doing this, or they could, this or that, and I could write about this part. So I think that's really helpful.
Some of the authors I talk to as well, they do get stuck at times, and they're trying to find a way to break that open, that kind of a dam that happens, and all their thoughts stop. So a change of scenery is always good, right? Just to go somewhere different. You're going to pick up on things. I love when somebody's writing about like an old farm, for example. Instead of sitting in your nice clean office in your house, go to some old farm and just sit there and smell the smells and hear the sounds and the creaking of old doors banging. You're like, oh, I'm here on set as I'm writing in the context. And it kind of opens the door to be a little more creative and maybe chase a new idea just by being in the scene.
Right. And just by taking yourself out of your norm and experiencing other things, it helps. The other thing I do, I know a lot of writers don't, I actually share my drafts as I go with a couple of people who can read it, like on Google Docs. And then I'll call them up and I'll be like, okay, have you read it? And they're like, yeah, I'm caught up. And I'll be like, something's not right with it. And they're like, well, I didn't understand why you did this. Were you getting to it later? And sometimes that's what I need too. Like, you didn't understand that? I thought it was clear. And then I go back and I read it and I'm like, oh, I had all these thoughts in my head that aren't on my paper. So that's helpful to me to get that feedback. I like that community kind of like, you're reading along with me and you're seeing that. I really don't believe there's ever one and done with writing. Even my books that are published, like I said, I was back reading them and I'm like, oh, I could make these changes, and at some point you have to be happy with what you did and move on. But, I like that collaboration with others. That's really something that is good for me creatively.
So, Andrea, we have listeners who are authors in the early days of writing. You're at a different stage than they're at. They want to be where you are. Multiple books and actively writing. They're just starting. They're just brand new to all of this. Besides, I love the fact that you write with the ending in mind. That's awesome. Is there anything else that you're kind of like you hear in the author circles that doesn't work for you and you've done it differently? Because I kind of get the sense when I talk to new authors that they feel like they're being corralled into this. There's one way to do it where you'll be successful and you have to follow these steps. Where you seem to be doing things differently traditionally and it's working for you. So there's got to be other things that you're like, I kind of do it this way.
My four novels that are out are in the third person. And most people who write fiction write in the first person. That is not the way my brain worked. So I wrote in the third person and I've not had anyone really complain about it. So like for me, that whole idea that you have to write in the first person, I was like, no, I don't. I'm like, that didn't work for me as I wrote my stories. So I just did it. I just did my thing. the idea that, I edit as I go. I know a lot of traditional authors, they just write if I'm stuck, I'll stop and I'll read and I will sit and edit because that's a different part of my brain to do that. So it activates something else. I just really think the biggest thing is to start writing the story you want to tell, whatever that is. And then to really try to find people who like that genre. They don't have to be writers. The people who beta read for me are in no way writers, but they're readers and they like the genre. And so they can give me feedback. And I think you have to develop a little bit of a tougher skin. Like your writing is not going to be for everyone, no matter what you write. I mean, there are people who don't like Stephen King, right? Like the first time I got a 2-star review, I wanted to cry. And then I remembered that there's no book that's a perfect 5-star or even, has all 4s and 5s. You're not going to make everybody happy. So I think that's really important as a new writer to just remember what is your reason for your writing. Absolutely be open to feedback, things that help your reader and the flow. But if someone doesn't like your story itself, that's kind of on them and not you. So I think that's important. The other thing I think is really important as a new writer in today's day and age is to understand that there are a lot of scammers out there. There are people who will gladly take your money, who will promise you the world. You should not be paying someone to publish your work. I watched a ton of YouTube videos on self-publishing. I did query agents. I never heard back, and I really wanted my book published, so I decided I was going to self-publish. And then I talked to other people who've paid thousands of dollars to what are vanity presses that are like, oh, we love your writing. We'll publish you. You just have to pay us $5,000. I did pay someone to edit for me just because that's a profession, and I have someone who takes photos for my covers. I pay for software, but I don't pay wholesale to, this package of we're going to publish your book. So that's the biggest thing I would tell people. Really watch what you're looking at. And, you start getting all these instant messages on Facebook about, I'm a great marketer and I can market your book. And probably not. I don't think the great marketers of the world have time to be coming on my Facebook instant message to tell me this. So, and I would tell you that is the hardest thing for me as an independent author is marketing. Like, it's not in my wheelhouse. How do I sell a book? But if you are going to put your book out there, it is not enough to just publish it and put it on Amazon. You've got to be getting yourself out in front of people, letting them know about the book, talking about the book, those kind of things. So that's been a very steep learning curve for me is like, how do I get people to know about my book, buy my book, read my book? So that's just a continuing thing of learning and being more comfortable with that.
So with your teaching background, once a teacher, always a teacher. I don't think you can shut that light switch off. Have you ever thought about helping young authors in their journey to write? You have a lot of great things to share with people and to kind of encourage that next generation of writers. Have you ever considered teaching?
I think so. I think, I'd love to teach like a community class for local people who want to become authors. That would be a great thing. The other thing I've been really thinking about is making some YouTube videos that are just kind of the basics and then links to videos I found really helpful. I don't want to reinvent that wheel. Like there's some really good videos out there on how to use different software to make your cover and those kind of things. Great. But I'd like to link that because when I was doing this, I had to wade through YouTube to find the things that were actually helpful. So to put it into a series and explain why it was helpful and how I got there, and then just allow people to explore those links, I think that's something I would like to spend my time to do. Again, not about the money. That one's really about helping other people so that they can get their writing out there. And maybe they'll be someone's next favorite author.
Yeah, because having all these great books is great. Again, doesn't seem like it's a way to get rich and, to have that big fancy yacht and all that. But maybe having the books gives you the opportunity then to teach And then people can work with you and you can coach them and be there in their corner or having writing groups on a Zoom call where a bunch of authors get together and just write together and be accountable to each other. You can be that facilitator, teacher role that you do so well historically and do that for the author community, and people can hire you to be their coach and walk them through from beginning to middle to the end. And because again, you see things differently than others, and there's going to be people that resonate with you that can't find people like you who would love to work with you. So I think that'd be an interesting thing to pursue down the road, possibly.
Definitely. And if there's anybody who is watching your podcast who would like to reach out to me, I do have a website. It's AndreaHecknerAuthor.com. And there's a contact me on there, and just send me an email, and I'm happy to connect with people and work with you. If you need someone to read something you've written or you have some technical questions, that'd be something I'd be happy to help other people with, because I do think you're right in that once a teacher, always a teacher. I love helping other people to pursue the things that they want. And, if that's writing a book, wonderful. So, I do encourage others. And I think, those are some really great ideas of things that I could do that could help other people.
Yeah, like I'm thinking too, like I had an author ask me recently, how do I set up a beta reading group? And I'm like, I don't know. So if I could pay you $25 and you'll teach me how to set up a beta reading group, that's money, that's value for me. And I'd gladly pay for that so that I could learn how to do that, because you know how to do that. I don't. So you have a skill and a talent and an ability I don't have. And I'd much rather just pay you than spend 10 hours on YouTube. That's a waste of my time. I'd much rather just pay somebody with the knowledge, learn, and then apply. So that's just one little piece. And then I could, how to do this. Those could be all little things that I could kind of like a buffet. I could kind of go in and I need help with this, this, and this. And Andrea is my person that can help me with these things. And I'm willing to pay for it because you're going to save me time. So it's just another way to kind of use your books as a door to leverage and then maybe have people pay you for your services. Again, you have a lot of knowledge I don't have. So
great. I like the ideas. I've made a note. See my pencils right here.
I see the pencils out. Yes. That's good. There's a lot of value with what you have. And being a guest on podcast obviously helps people to find you. Maybe one day down the road, you have a podcast where you can do this and teach people. You could coach people on a podcast, and I could listen to you coach another author and go, hang on. I love when Andrea coaches authors. I want to be coached by Andrea. Here's my credit card. Where do I sign up? Because I hear you doing this. So either being a guest or being a host, you have a lot of things to share with people and a lot of gifts. So great. Just putting it out there in the world, maybe you think on that a little bit.
I will think on that, David. Those little kernels get in my head. So,
see?
Then they can grow.
Right? It's like popcorn.
Yeah, it is like popcorn. Some of them won't pop though. Like out of your bowl.
Some burn and get stuck to the bottom of the bag, but some of them pop, right? Yeah, I love it. So what's the timeline on the next book? Like, are you close to an idea of when that would be available?
The timeline is probably the end of the year. The first book I really did bang out in about 3 months. I had this great idea, and I would come home from work and spend 3 or 4 hours every night just writing. And that kind of flowed into the second book and even into the third to some degree. And then that initial idea and that whole big, long story kind of was done. And the fourth book took me 6 months to write. And then I had to edit it, and I had to swallow the bitter pill of other people's opinions and figure out where there were plot holes in places and, do all that. So I really do see this one. I would say in total, it's maybe a quarter done. Now, of course, that for me means a beginning and an end, and the 3/4 is the middle. Most people would think if you're talking about being a quarter done, you have written a fourth of the book in order. No, that again is not the way my brain works. Here's an anecdote about that. When I wrote the first book, one of my beta readers said, this doesn't make any sense to me. It just jumps around way too much. And I'm like, no, it makes sense. And then I printed it and I old school was writing on it and I realized it didn't make sense. And I began cutting the sections up and I had them all over my floor in the basement and I was moving them around so that it made sense and it lined up better. And all those ideas were still there, but I physically moved them because it worked for my brain to like look at them and move them. And it was like a gigantic puzzle that I had put together, but all the pieces weren't in the right place. So, I do think like you have to allow your brain to work in the way that it works best. Something that, David, you may not know about me is that I have dyslexia, and learning to read was a major struggle for me. So, I credit both of my parents and my grandmother for me being as literate as I am, because as soon as they were alerted to there being a problem, they put everything into making sure that I was literate. They took me to tutoring, and my grandma sat with me and read the dictionary with me, and we read about words and their origin and their meaning and how they go together. And I'm very blessed that I had those people who made sure that happened, but it also means that my brain processes a little differently than some people. And I think that's part of why my stories flow the way they do and why I write the way that I do, because I do have, that just little bit of neurodiversity to me than maybe your mainstream author. So I just encourage people that no matter what, I had people who told me I would never go to college. I had people who told me I'd never graduate. Other than that stupid dissertation, I finished all of my coursework for getting my doctorate. But there's a big difference in writing a dissertation or writing a fiction novel. So
yeah,
I'm not going to give anyone advice on writing their dissertation for their PhD. that did not go well for me. So, but I really do believe that you have to believe in yourself and that you have a story to tell, and then you have to go from there.
So that's another community you could serve, Andrea. Authors that are writing and they're working through their dyslexia and they feel alone. They feel like they don't have anybody to reach out to and someone understands kind of how their brain works and how they process. And they're just like, if I could just find someone like that, I would love to ask questions of and learn from. So as we talked, this is like that onion thing, just getting the different layers that I see of you. It's amazing. It's amazing. So yeah, I'm excited to see where you go with all this, all these little kernels. If any of these pop, I'm going to be so happy. So
if they pop, I will be sure to say, thank you, David Campbell, for planting that seed in my brain.
There you go. All right. Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about the website again so we can send people to you. I see you have your Facebook, your Instagram, your LinkedIn as well is available through your website. Can you just again talk us through the website? And then I have a question I want to ask as we end off.
So the website is AndreaHecknerAuthor.com. And there's just some introductory information about me. My current books are on there. You can buy them through the website. They're the same price on there as they are on Amazon, but I will sign them for you. However, I can only ship to the U.S. I agreed to ship a book to Canada one time, and I was in shock by how much money they charged me to ship to Canada. Ridiculous. I live in Wisconsin. I probably could have driven it there for cheaper.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in the U.S., I'm happy to do that. There just some, and then I link another podcast I was on, an article that I wrote when I was doing the National Writing Project, and just some current stuff. So that's my website, and I encourage people to visit that. Again, that was another learning curve. I made the website myself. Beautiful. So, I bought a book. And I followed the book. And, there's a person with a talent that I didn't have, but I was able to learn from. So,
see?
Right. So definitely believe in that.
So that Writing Our Way to Success article you wrote could be a mini course that I could buy, right? You could easily turn that into a little course and that could become a money generator for you. There's so many opportunities for you. I just love when I meet a creative person. And again, a teacher's a teacher, and I don't think you can shut that off. So as we go, Andrea, I would love to get your tips on writing in the third person for those that haven't really considered it as the way you do it. Is there any kind of little things that you would suggest on how to write in the third person and connect with an audience? Anything special that we could think about?
I just think of it as narrating someone's story. So the overall narrator. So, I'm not the people when they, I'm telling a story for these people. So I'd say, David was sitting in his chair instead of I sat down in my chair, So just really thinking of it in the third person, like I'm a narrator of this story and I'm going to tell the story of other people. And it includes dialogue that they have, which is naturally in the first person because they're the one talking. But really just thinking of, that idea of having someone narrate your life, that kind of goes on in my head sometimes. Like I'm narrating these people's lives. I'm narrating their story. So thinking of it that way.
Yeah.
I'd like Morgan Freeman to be that voice that narrates in my head, but it's not, you can just hear him being like, and then she
picked up her pencil and she wrote down an idea, which was a seed or an idea. It's going to pop into popcorn and make her $1 million.
Like made into a movie. I'd like it to be done in the third person with Morgan Freeman narrating.
Oh, Morgan, if you're listening, definitely. Yeah. I love it. Right? Yeah. The voice of, I love that. Yeah. It's kind of like your typical movies too, or a TV show where the voiceover person's walking you down the road and explaining what's happening. And you're like, oh, I feel warm and fuzzy having this person lead me through the story.
So the 5th book that I'm working on is actually in the first person.
Oh.
I decided to challenge myself. Can I do this? And so I'm working, and I do find myself having to go back and rewrite that so it's in the first person. So I do believe in challenging yourself and challenging the way you think of things. So, we'll see how that goes. We'll see if it ends up being in the first person when I'm done.
That's good, because I think the other thing is authors sometimes slide into a safety or a comfort zone and they don't really push themselves to try something new. So you're doing that, right? You're putting yourself out there.
Right. I mean, if you read somebody who's very prolific as an author, you often can figure out their formula.
Yeah.
And I don't want my books to become formulaic.
Right.
Like there's so much in life that I don't believe life is formulaic. Like you never know what's happening. What's going to happen next? We don't know. I'm a planner by heart. I love to plan and plan as much as possible. I have lists everywhere and plans, but I know that life's unpredictable. And so I think that books should be too.
We're going to have links as well, Andrea, to your website, to all your information, to your community as well. Again, we're thinking of you guys as you rebuild and I'm glad everyone's safe there through all the things that have happened just recently. We'll have links to all that for people to follow up. And if you can donate wherever you are in this great world of ours, I'm sure the community would love to have your support as we go through these days. But Andrea, thank you so much for making time to be on the podcast. And thank you for all your teaching background and all the lives you poured into in the past. But it's just the beginning. There's more to coming for you, more great people that you're going to help. And I'm excited to watch your journey as this unfolds for you. So thank you for being part of the podcast.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, David. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. All the information, as always, everyone in the show notes. Make sure you follow up with Andrea. Buy all the books and be ready for the 5th one coming soon. And make sure you live life in the third person. There you go, everyone. There's your challenge. Thanks, Andrea.
All right.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun. Well, I'll give you a secret. It is. it's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.